All right. Welcome, everybody. I hope that you can hear me and see me. We're letting everybody into the room. And you find yourself at week 3 of our Humanities Without Walls grant seeking February series. I see in the chat some folks are asking about whether last week or the week before are available, and they are. Maybe Peggy will be able to share the link with where you can see the sessions from the previous weeks. And that's a good thing that you may want to go back and review after today, because I will be starting to bring all of our work together today regarding the planning that we did and goal setting that we did in week 1, and the crafting of a good idea around which to build a proposal that we did in week 2. And with that, I will share my screen here, and we'll get on with the work of week 3, which I'm really excited to share with you today. And here it is. All right, so today's theme, our topic, is project life cycles and building a collaborative team. All my contact information is here. I've had a few people reach out and ask questions. Feel free to do that. If you would like any of the materials from today's presentation, Peggy's posted a link where you can find those. And if you have questions or you want to follow up, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Maybe something I can clarify for you. Happy to do that. Today, project life cycles and building a collaborative team is on our agenda. You can see the topics that we've covered in past weeks, and then next week we'll wrap up our February series with developing a funding strategy, which is a little bit different than applying for just one grant. It's having not all your eggs in one basket. So come on back for that. And also, we're hoping, have a sneak peek for you of the RFP, or at least some of the details of the RFP for HWW's most recent call for papers, which is part of why we wanted to do this series, to get you all thinking about that, preparing ideas, and thinking about how to pull your team together so that you'll have a competitive proposal. Each week, I try to make this session answer a key question for you. So here are the questions that we've looked at so far. And today's question that I'm focusing on is, how can I build a track record of success with a team that will make funders confident in our ability to be good stewards of resources? I've framed the question to be compatible with a topic that we talked about last week, or that I teased last week. And that was that we are really thinking about 2 key elements when we want to make a competitive proposal. One is a good idea, an idea that others can invest in. We talked about that last week. And the other is a team that is prepared to pull off that idea. I'll say here, I didn't say this last week, but since our focus today is on building a collaborative team, I've now been in the role of associate dean for research for about 3 years, and for many more years prior to that, I've been in the grant seeking and reviewing world. And what I will tell you is, if I had to pick between one or the other of those 2 things, a fundable idea, a good idea, or a team that has a track record of success working together, I'll take the second every time when it comes to putting together a competitive proposal. Funders very much want to see that you're not pulling things together at the last minute. And that's because these funders also have a mission, they have a goal. They want to give their resources to folks who can help them achieve their goals. And a proposal is your chance to align the 2, right? Your efforts and theirs. And so if you have a team that can pull it off and you can show that you've done it before, it inspires a lot of confidence. So that's what we're going to talk about today. In order to do that, I think you have to take a slightly different focus towards building a team. And so here's what I mean by that. Why do you need a collaborative team, you might ask? And in the humanities and arts, in many areas of the humanities and arts, it's a perfectly valid question. And the answer might be that you don't at all those times when you're doing your work. There might be times when working alone is the more efficient choice. You can seek funding and support for working alone, and that's just fine. But there are also times, especially if your path to intellectual leadership has turned your gaze a little bit towards a longer horizon, towards bigger things, bigger and better things. You'll recall that that's what I asked folks who participated in the first event to do, is to dream of something larger than you can accomplish yourself. Maybe it has more reach. Maybe it involves more people. Maybe it gives other people more opportunity to learn and grow. When you can't do something alone, that's when it's time to build a collaborative team, right? I think it's a healthy thing for us to think about all of our intellectual projects on that scale, even if we decide, well, I'm not there yet. Because it allows us to think about how we can help the most people with what we're doing. Even if what we're doing today is maybe writing a paper, what would you like to see that become? If people take up the ideas in that paper and really get excited about them, what comes next? And maybe it's something that you need a team to facilitate. I think equally important, and this is going to be a theme we're going to come back to in the HWW RFP, and is really a driving focus around the HWW program in general, and that is when your outcomes, the things you're trying to do with your research include building relationships and developing careers other than your own, like graduate students or undergraduate students or junior colleagues or people in the community. You often need a team of people to help you pull that off, because doing it alone is very difficult. When you want to scale your work up or out, when you want the experience of the thing you made to be shared by more people, maybe it needs to be in a different format. Maybe it needs to travel from one place to many places around the country. Maybe you want to do it on video. Any kind of shift like that where you're thinking about how can I reach more people? That's often a call for a collaborative team, because you need to draw on new kinds of expertise. And then finally, anytime you plan something like that hints at that level of scale or that size of a project, and you propose it to your external funder, a team with a track record of success is going to help you. And so even if you're thinking about doing this later down the road, building a track record first so that the first time you ask for resources isn't the big multi-million-dollar ask is a wise idea. So when, right? That's the key. So follow me here. I'm going to give you a way to ask when. And it's going to start off kind of simple, but you'll see that we can modify it. But from the beginning, I want you to have in your head a project that you care about. And I want you to get into that mode. I ask you to think about, in both of the prior 2 weeks, about how this project moves from your own idea to an idea others can get excited about, and then how you can involve other people in it, how it grows to be something bigger than you can do alone. So those are the themes of phase 1 and phase 2 of this workshop. So think about that right now. Give yourself maximum permission, if you will, to dream big. Yes, I have a puppy over there. Sorry about that. And here's a little thinking tool for thinking about phases and where you might need some additional help. This is my chart of what I like to call the project life cycle. And the labels here are very generalized, and I'll talk through them in a minute. And then bear with me if this doesn't look like your work, because I'm going to maybe show you a couple variations and we'll make some modifications. And I invite you to do the same thing. But the key thing here is to get us to pinpoint, when do we need more help? When do we need more expertise? When might it make sense for us to think about building a team, building relationships as part of our work in order to achieve the next goal? So a project, any project, tends to follow a life cycle that's something like this. And not all of them get all the way up the chain, and that's fine. But successful ones tend to do this. So they start off with a proof of concept phase, where you're trying to convince first yourself and then maybe a few other people in your area of expertise that this idea you have has some value. This might be a theoretical exploration. It might be a little demonstration that you do only in your classroom. It's a proof of concept, right? Once you have that worked out and you have some confidence in your own idea, then the next step is, well, let's try it to see if it works beyond my little sandbox or off paper, right? We say an idea on paper. Let's try it in real life. So maybe this is a syllabus. Now you're teaching the class, or maybe this is a paper with an idea, and this is a study. The point of a study like that is efficacy. Like, does it do what it's supposed to do? Do I run into any problems I didn't foresee? Can we make it better? Right? Up from that, let's imagine that goes great. That you emerge from this convinced, and perhaps with another group of people, that the idea has merit and actually can help some people. Now you want to share it and see if it works in the wild, as it were, or outside the laboratory, outside the controlled conditions that you subjected it to for efficacy testing or evaluation. Or maybe at one institution versus another institution. That's the next step. If that goes great, then pretty soon people are really excited about it. And all of a sudden they're going, you know what? We'd like to make that a centerpiece of our curriculum. Or we want to build a academic program. I want to come and study with you to learn that thing. And you're like, wait a minute, this idea I had as a paper way down here, now it's something you can major in? Interesting. So you have to think about, where does this thing live so that you can institutionalize and scale it so that the most people can benefit from it. So I mentioned maybe that doesn't resonate. So now let's start playing with this idea. What forms might this take? Here's one that might look a little bit more familiar if you're a researcher in the humanities. You might give a talk, and then that might become an article, might become a textbook, and then might become an academic program sometime at some point, maybe a minor, right? That's just one pathway. And again, I want you to think expansively here what these mean for you. We have a filmmaker. How does that look? Oh, okay, so we might write a treatment. This is a text version of what this film might be. It's going to cost a lot to make this film, so we got to get people excited about it, got to get some people willing to fund it. So we should make a trailer, a really short version of what the movie is going to be. Maybe gives them a sense of the visual style, of the narrative storytelling, that kind of thing. So it's a little bit more than the piece on paper, and gets people convinced, yeah, I want to see the whole thing. So maybe we make a short, and then eventually we make a feature. So here's what I want you to notice here. As you move up this scale, as you move up the arrow here, you need more help. And there's more opportunity for others to invest and play a meaningful role in the outcome. So think about that for a second with me. Treatment, well, that's maybe just the director or would-be director. And maybe they've never even made a film before. Maybe up until now, they've only written articles and books, but they're thinking, this could be a film. I don't know. You know, you get your pulse quickens, you see your intellectual leadership pathway a little bit differently, and now you are doing something that you're not quite sure how to do by yourself, but you can get started because writing a treatment is a text, and I can describe a film project. Okay, I can do that by myself. But the minute you start moving up that next level, well, I need somebody who's really good at photography and shooting, not just with my phone, but a real movie, and lighting, and maybe I need music too. So now you are suddenly thinking about a team, and you're not only thinking about them working for you, you're thinking about what can we make together. I hope this is making sense, because what I'm going to ask you to do in our little group breakout session is have a conversation with your group mates. Take that idea that you're dreaming and dream it all the way up the arrow. And in each phase, I want you to think about what are the challenges that you would face there, and how would you meet them? I've given you some questions, as I did last week, so that you can make sense, you can operationalize these moments. So, a little bit lighthearted here. Proof of concept is this a thing? Maybe your idea is here, and if it's here, maybe it's mostly just you or you and a small group. But if you're up here, does this work in controlled conditions? All of a sudden, now you're thinking about, how do I get access to those conditions? How do I make the conditions necessary to really see this idea and put it through its paces, to convince myself and others that, yeah, it can work. This can work. This idea could become a film. Or I think there's an article here, but it could be a whole book. Maybe you're at the effectiveness stage. Does this work for other people in other places? Yeah, sure, it worked for us this one time when we taught it in our class, but will it work all across the Big Ten? Maybe it's time to ask that question. Or maybe you have a project that's way up here and you're thinking, wow, this needs to be something that everyone in the US can experience at some level. First of all, how do we sustain this in the long term so it's available? And then how do we grow it? How do we think about it at that level? Who do I need to talk to? So in your group, I want you to think about, first of all, where is your idea today? And what could help you get to the next level? What help would you need to get there? Welcome back. I hope you had a good opportunity to talk through the diagram and to see its usefulness in thinking about your project as part of a trajectory or life cycle. In my experience, this is not something that we're always prepared equally well to do in the humanities and arts. In some areas we are, and in some areas we aren't. And so I'm always curious to hear how this way of thinking about your idea, maturing over time, growing, helping more people, changing, sat with you, and how you had to make modifications to the waypoints. Anybody want to volunteer?
So one of the things we were talking about in our group is since a few of us were latecomers, we weren't necessarily focusing on the diagram, but is this issue of how you start building the relationships and the issue of trust and how you're assessing trust, and sort of, how long does this process take if the grant proposal is due in 4 months?
Yeah, that's a really good point. So it does tend to vary. Um, I think that one of the things that you'll see is that some of the structure of academic institutions can work in your favor in speeding these things along. So, for example, if you have a humanities center and I have a humanities center, there might be some infrastructure there that allows us to work together faster because there's a predefined set of roles and maybe even some routines and some support for allowing us to do that. If you have to build all of that from scratch, I would say it takes a while. And so it's probably not possible within a very short time period to have both of these things that I mentioned uh, to make the best possible proposal. The good news is though, that could just mean you have the wrong RFP because many opportunities are really aimed at the very beginning at allowing for those kinds of relationships to be built. So if you've ever had a planning grant, that's explicitly what those kinds of things are for. They aren't to necessarily do a proof of concept even. They're to get the team together, share ideas, start building trust so that you can do a proof of concept project in the next phase of work. So that's the other lesson here that we'll talk about in a lot more depth next week is at every stage, you'll probably have multiple opportunities to think about what's the appropriate ask for resources for for the place that we are. And so a big part of it is just being honest about what you need and when. Ask this question for the more senior people, especially in the room. Um, have folks taken a project all the way up the line? Do you feel like you've gotten all the way up?
My name is Marty, and I don't have my video up, but I work at a Newark Earthworks Center, the Newark Earthworks Center at Ohio State, and we were able to, over a period of 15 years, it took a long time, but we started talking about how we would interpret these earthworks that are 2,000 years old. We got community buy-in, and we got community participation, especially with the American Indian community, who had not been involved with them at all. And we did the community discussions through Newark Earthworks Days, public events, tours, and things like that. And we learned about the site as well as our communities did too. And we were able to get a group of people with different kinds of expertise to come and learn about the site. We hosted a conference of 100 American Indian scholars to the site. And it led to these public events where we had scholars speaking about their areas of expertise and applying it to our topic, the earthworks. And that finally led to articles that I was able to write. I'm not faculty, I'm ABD, but I'm staff. And I've published 3 articles and 2 book chapters. And then we also published a book about the earthworks that is now out there in the world, which was an amazing step. We didn't go as far as create any programs, academic programs, but we have an American Indian Studies minor, and the earthworks is one of the topics that's included in the minor courses.
That's
fantastic. It took a long time.
Congratulations, Marty. That is wonderful. I'm from near that area of Ohio, and so I also want to call out a concept that we talked about last week. We talked about the boxes in the grid for making a successful proposal, and one of them is opportunity. And you can see that's a wonderful example of how the local features that you have available, which are these earthworks, where constitute a unique opportunity for folks in your area at Ohio State, and really all around the state of Ohio, because there are many pretty fascinating earthworks all around, right?
There are, yeah.
Well done. Thank you. I can always count on there being these fascinating stories. So I've done this workshop, I don't know, maybe for 5 years now at various places. And I always hear inspiring stories about how these things go. And when they're told in retrospect, like Marty just did, often people will also say, we never imagined it would go all that way, right? And so today, I'm just asking you to do one thing. Imagine it will go all that way. Here's what academics are really notoriously bad at: planning for success. We plan for failure really well. But you're allowed to dream big, and you're allowed to think about, well, what could it then become? And then what after that? Because when you do that, you open up these really wonderful possibilities, not just for yourself. The reason we do it is we feel like, oh, I don't know if I could pull all that off. Well, you can't, not by yourself. But if you allow yourself to think about what it would really take, then you can start to think, oh, all right, now it turns out for a conference of Native scholars, there's some resources for that. We could apply to a foundation for that.
Mhm.
Really cool. All right, I'm going to share my screen and we're going to get to another conversation. I won't break you out in the second one. We'll stay in large group, but I want to set it up a little bit. Let me do that again. I hope you found these questions useful, but once again, please feel free to modify this as much as necessary, because all of this work doesn't fit neatly into one little model. And I think Marty's example showed us really well that, the proof of concept, the institutionalization and scale actually turned out to be a book published, because that was the thing that they could share with the world. And these phases here are really about expanding participation and bringing in people who could really test the validity and the cultural sensitivity of what they were doing to make sure that it was responsible and accurate and all of those things. Those have resonance with these terms, but they're not direct equivalent. So please feel free to modify it so that you feel like it's suiting. What I would have you do, and what I would highly recommend of anyone who is thinking about an engaged, long-term collaborative project, in anything longer than about 6 months, is put another work object or outcome on your list of to-dos. Along with all the other scholarly outcomes, I would ask you to consider a project charter. And if you've never done a project charter, it can be a really interesting and fun thing to do with your team. What are they? You can look them up. There are, in the project management world, they can be quite operational, but I'm really talking about something a bit more organic today, and that is a document in writing that is sort of co-owned and co-authored by the team that defines each person's investment in the work, and investment in the way we talked about it last week. Why are they wearing the t-shirt? What do they have in it? Where is their heart? Where are their values? It serves to set value-based expectations for how you want to work together as a team. So if you say a spirit of this project is reciprocity, how will you enact that reciprocity so that everyone benefits equally from the work of the group? And instead of leaving that to chance or hoping that it comes together, you actually sit and make that the responsibility of the group to think through. And you write it down and you have some accountability there. When it works well, a project charter lives as a kind of a guide, so that if you bring new people into the team or your team expands to include other institutions, you can keep the interests of the participants aligned and the values of the participants aligned and make sure that they're shared. If you encounter a challenge, you can consult it. It's not quite bylaws. It's a little bit more lofty than something that bureaucratic, but you can kind of see where I'm getting there. And of course, perhaps its most important function is down the line. It prevents misunderstandings and hurt feelings. So I'll give you an example from a project that we did with HWW when I was in a co-PI role, and we were doing the grad lab practicum for the first time. We had 3 institutions with teams of faculty and graduate students at three different places, and we happened to also be in 3 different time zones. And we were generating information that all 3 teams needed to access as data for working on the project. And so we had to have a way to check that data in inform the group, and let everybody know there was something new and that everyone had equal access to it. So that became operationally important, but we also saw that if we weren't careful, these fabulous grad students and junior faculty member in one case would get hung up waiting for permission from one of the more senior PIs to do anything. And that was becoming a real roadblock, especially if we were 3 hours apart or something. And so we said, let's come back together and make this clear. When you come to the table as somebody doing this work, you're a researcher. You have these responsibilities with the data, but otherwise you're free to use it. And we would expect you to. You're not waiting for permission. And that felt really good. And it eventually evolved into about a 7-page, we called it a playbook, but a set of guidelines by which we were all agreeing to work. And I think it made the project work much more smoothly. It also helped enfranchise and empower our graduate student participants to feel like they were contributors to this project in a different way. I want to seed the last few minutes of our conversation by talking about 2 values that you're going to see prominently featured, and you may have already, in the messaging coming out of this round of HWW, and they are reciprocity and redistribution. My question is, if you can imagine thinking about a team for whom these are shared values, and that you would like them to be not just the focus of the material you're looking at, but also you want to exhibit these characteristics in how you work. Maybe you would consider what do these values mean to you? How might a project that you're part of put them into practice, or maybe a project you've been part of has done this? You'd like to tell us a little bit about that. What new ways of working perhaps might they inspire? Like maybe they cause you to rethink the way you've done something in the past. And then in your current circumstances, whether it's the nature of the project or the institution where you work, or maybe your institutional role, what challenges would you foresee making these key features of your work, reciprocity and redistribution? So my first question was, how do those values sit with you? Are they things that you can feel part of in terms of sharing them? And do you have examples of maybe how they might be or how they have been exhibited in your work in the past? I know this is heady stuff, right? That's okay. For folks who are new this week, there might be one thing I didn't say. This workshop series maybe is a little different than some you've been to. I'm trying to show you some ways to practice, but that's all I'm getting done in the hour. I'm just showing them to you. You'll have to go home and take them home and practice, and that's okay. So this might be a new way of thinking about how you pull together a collaborative team, and forming a charter about how you want to work together might be a relatively new thing for you.
This idea of reciprocity is a very important one, and along with redistribution, I'm the director of 2 small museums on a university campus, the University of Iowa. We don't have faculty curators available to us for any of our projects, and as folks know, it's very difficult to get release time to work on a museum exhibit or any other kind of particularly inventive project. But for us, it's the only way that as a staff we can really accomplish all sorts of things. The project that I've been workshopping each week here involves a collaboration with the Department of Dance and using our mammal gallery as a place for non-traditional dance performances. We're creating videos, and then hopefully the grant to which we're applying together will fund production of these videos, and we'll be able to screen them on the lawn of the museum this fall when classes start up again. And it will involve community members and undergraduate students in the audience to expose them to this unusual collaboration. So for me, this idea of reciprocity is key, and it really speaks to everything we do. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Liz. I find that our colleagues in libraries and museums, this is their lifeblood. They exist in this space of relationship building, and enabling the work of other people is their work. And so I'm super grateful. My own career has benefited tremendously from folks in archives and libraries and museums. So thank you. Yeah, Christina.
Bill, I have a quick question about the project charter, if we can go back there for
Sure.
a second. I love this idea, and I'm fairly new to working with a large team of people. So I was wondering if you have models for creating that, or suggestions of where to go, what would be a good template for that, especially as I'm a relatively new as Humanities Research Center director, and so this will be in my future, but I'm just beginning to do these projects. So I'd like to do it in a not just systematic, but also responsible way. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to share some. I'll seek. I have permission from the team that I worked with in HWW to share our project charter, and I think Peggy can make that one available. So I'll share that with her if she needs it.
Thank you.
So you'll have that one, but I'll give you a couple. I'll give you a broad strokes outline about what the charter generally has in it, and then you'll see it also has a pretty wide range of variation as well, depending on what the nature of the work is. What they almost always do is define who's participating and what the relative roles are. So they make those relationships a bit more explicit. And that helps with these sort of reciprocal relations. So you can say, oh, the community members can come to this person when they need, when they have questions about reimbursement or something like that. So sometimes they're very procedural, but just defining the roles is a key part. Another one is taking the boundaries of the project and rendering those in the charter in some way. So we're going to work together for 18 months. We expect to deliver this on this day or have this event by this time. So obviously those are useful, a timeline or a working timeline. All those things can usually come from the proposal, but they're sort of presenting them brand new for all the people who are then in implementation phase once the proposal is successful. I think what tends to vary is this code of conduct, this set of guidelines, or this process for working together that is values grounded but procedurally anchored in the work that the group is going to do. And that can actually look quite different. So a project that I'm working on right now, and actually a meeting I'll go to after this one, I never imagined myself doing in my career, but the way my career has gone, I now do it quite a lot, is a clinical trial. And so our clinical trial team is quite large, and we're in 16 clinics all over the state of Michigan. And as a member of the PI team, my job is to make sure all the providers who work with us, all the research assistants who are in the clinics, and then all the research staff at MSU all kind of understand what the core values that where we're after. So yes, we're interested in doing science, but this is a community-based clinical trial, and our first goal is patient care. And so we have some things that have to happen, particularly in COVID time, where we don't want somebody making a decision that would put a patient at risk in order to get a data point. So that's an example of an ethical situation that we want to render very clearly right now. And we'll do that by saying, ideally, here's what we want to do. If that doesn't happen, then here's where we'd make modifications, with the idea that patient safety is our first concern, if that makes any sense. Now, that's a set of considerations that I wouldn't have had in any other kind of project. But we renew that pretty much consistently as we meet new situations, so that the research assistants might call us up and say, okay, so the charter says I should do this. Here's the situation. I think that means I'm supposed to do this, right? And then we can more easily address those for instances. Antoinette and Jason, do you want to add anything to the reciprocity and redistribution talk, or?
Well, I would just say that, Bill, you've done a fantastic job of articulating it in very real terms. And when you were telling your last anecdote, I was thinking, that is the kind of care and repair ethos that you described for a patient-facing situation that we ought to aspire to be able to carry out in all of our research. And so I think that example is really appropriate and should not be exceptional as we think about ethical ways of carrying out the production of new knowledge, and thinking about the ways in which, as we bring non-academic community partners into our conversations, that we take a care and repair attitude toward them, particularly for those of us who are white, straight, middle class.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. Some of these specific situations like patient care where there's already an ethic of do no harm help us make those explicit, but they then hit home very quickly, like, oh yeah, we should do that. We should do no harm all the time. We don't need a Hippocratic oath to do the right thing, but it does sometimes help. I'll close with just a little teaser of next week. So today we've really explored two key ideas about building a collaborative team. One is figuring out where you need and where your idea can engage more people. And then thinking about and taking seriously as part of your scholarly work how you will work together in a values-centered way. Giving yourself license to do both of those things are the anchors of building a strong collaborative team and of writing a great proposal, I should add. Because a team that understands itself, has a clear sense of its vision, who needs to do what, and how they'll work together, will present a really powerful proposal, without question. Next week, we will talk about a funding strategy, and we will finally talk about how to ask for things, which is probably what you got into this workshop for to begin with. But now that you have a great idea and a great team, we'll figure out what else do you need? What are the other things to make sure that you're successful? And that will be the element of that we'll take up next week. So thanks for coming. Thanks for coming back. And I hope to see you all next week. And maybe we'll get a sneak preview of this, of the RFP. Thank you.